Good afternoon, everyone. Carahsoft Technology would like to welcome you to our Cloudflare webinar, Enhancing Public Sector Security and Performance with Cloudflare One. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Robert Rasner, Senior Solutions Engineer at Cloudflare, and our moderator, Leo Bala, Solutions Engineer at Cloudflare. Robert, the floor is all yours.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. It's a beautiful day in Cleveland. I hope hope you're having great weather where you are as well. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Cloudflare and specifically Cloudflare One. I'll start off with a little bit of background and introduction to Cloudflare. I'll tell you a little bit about Cloudflare Zero Trust, but most of our time today is going to be spent actually showing you how that works. And I've got a couple of sample use cases that we'll go through. How that looks from a user perspective, how it looks from an admin perspective. And if I time it right, we'll have some time for questions at the end. But as we're going through this, if you have questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat, and Leo will do his best to answer those, and we'll pick up any stragglers at the end as necessary. So I like to start off every presentation that I give talking about Cloudflare's corporate mission, right? And it's pretty simple. It is to help build a better internet. So what does that mean? Right, when our founders started Cloudflare, I think about 15 years ago, they came up with this mission to build a better internet. And the reason they wanted to do that was because the internet wasn't designed for the ways in which we are now using it, right? So their goal was to make the internet more secure, more reliable, and faster. And to that end, what we've done as a company is deployed solutions at more than 600 locations around the world. That's in more than 300 cities, in nearly 150 countries at this point, including mainland China. And what that allows us to do is everything that Cloudflare does, whether that's layer 3 DDoS, whether that's web application firewalling, whether it's secure web gateway, we're moving security functions that have traditionally been at the edge of your data center, so right in front of all of your applications and services, and we're moving it out to the edge of the network, closer to where users are today and closer to where attackers are, so that when we see an attack, we can block it at the edge of the network. The thing that really stands out to me, actually, it's not on this slide anymore, but we're within, I think, 50 milliseconds. So the blink of an eye of 95% of the world's internet connected population. That's huge. That allows us to do everything that we do at Cloudflare. I'll probably loop back to this slide a couple times during our presentation. So what we're doing when we see all of that traffic, and to be clear, about 20% of all web traffic runs on Cloudflare's network. And we're seeing attacks coming from all over the world, and we're not sleeping on that data. We're actually turning it into actionable intelligence that manifests itself in a lot of different locations in the Cloudflare portfolio, including our email gateway, including Cloudflare Zero Trust, including web application firewalling, and all of the other things that we do. So that's a little background on what Cloudflare does at a high level. So let's dig into Cloudflare Zero Trust, right? And when we talk about Zero Trust, I think it's important to go back to where we started with this, right? Not we, but as an industry, right? When we needed to create access for our users to the things that were important to us as an organization, we did exactly what I talked about before. We had our data center down here, and we put a bunch of security things in front of that data center, including firewalling, denial of service protection boxes, web application firewalling, secure web gateway, VPN concentrators. And you know what? It was good. It worked pretty well for the way that we worked a long time ago. Excuse me. But then all of a sudden, it wasn't good anymore because we changed the way that we work. We moved our applications from having all of them in the data center to having some of them up in public cloud. Some of our applications turned into SaaS applications or platform as a service. Our users all of a sudden went home to work during COVID, right? And we see, even more attacks coming from, all over the place. And really what we needed to do was change how we think about how we're providing secure access for our users. So how can we do that? So instead of sending everything through the internet to our gateway here, another way to do that, and what we think at Cloudflare is the best way, is to send your traffic through the Cloudflare network. Whether that traffic is coming from your locations, from your offices and your users that sit back here, whether it's coming from your data centers, whether this data center or that data center, or if it's coming from your employees, where you have managed devices on which you can install a VPN client, or maybe you need to provide secure access for your vendors and your contractors, and they don't want to install a client. So we need to be able to find a way that we can provide secure access, not only to the things that we've always allowed access to inside our data center, but provide secure access to our SaaS applications, to our public cloud infrastructure where we have other applications running. And also, we don't want to forget about being able to provide secure access to the broader internet. So things that are on the internet, maybe these aren't applications that we're hosting or that are hosted for us, but just general websites. We want to be able to make sure that our users are browsing the internet in a secure fashion. So I told you I had a couple use cases that I wanted to share with you. Use case 1 and 2 are kind of go together. This is why I lumped them in over here. I want to show you how we can allow public access to applications that are in the data center. And to be clear, in the example I'm using, the data center is on RFC 1918 address space. So what that means is that those addresses are not routable on the internet. So there have been ways to provide access to these applications in the past using network address translation, but I'm going to show you a different way to do that. And I'll loop then down to how we can then secure that. So maybe you want to provide access to a specific application here, but you don't want it to be public. So what we'll first do is make it public, and then I'll show you how to lock that down so that it's only for specific users or specific groups of users that you want to have access to that application. So with Cloudflare Zero Trust, and to make this all happen, one of the big things we do on this end is install a small piece of software in your data center. I'm showing here where we're installing that software on a virtual machine. You can install it on, bare metal machines. You can install it on Windows, Linux, OS X if that's your thing in your data center. So we're pretty flexible on how that is deployed. But what that does is create a secure encrypted outbound connection actually through the firewall to a handful of the closest Cloudflare points of presence. We connect to multiples for a couple reasons, right? One is for redundancy, and the other is for performance. We generally recommend that you have more than one of these. Cloudflare D is the name of the software. We recommend that you have more than one instance of that at each data center, and we recommend that you have it at each of your data centers. So with that as kind of a backdrop, I'll show you how we can allow public access to an application sitting in the data center. So let's see. I'll jump over to the Cloudflare dashboard. If you're not familiar with the Cloudflare dashboard, this is the account home, right? This is the overview page when you first authenticate and log into the Cloudflare dashboard. Everything that we do at Cloudflare, every product that we offer, everything that we have is configurable from within this dashboard, whether that's R2 storage, which is S3 compatible, or email security. We see Zero Trust here, Magic Firewall, Layer 3, Layer 4 DDoS. Everything that we do is configurable from within here. So that's pretty cool. For our purposes today, we're going to be spending our time in Zero Trust. So let's go visit that. And here in the Zero Trust page, again, you have kind of a high-level overview. What we're looking at is just kind of a lab environment. So there's not a lot of traffic here, not a lot of stuff going on, but bear with me. I think we'll be able to show you some good stuff. So again, looking back at this, we're going to create an application here that's publicly accessible, right? So what I want to do there is come down to networks and look at tunnels. And I have a single tunnel created here. And just as a matter of reference, that's this tunnel here, right? It's from a machine in my data center that's created out to Cloudflare's network. We can see that's a healthy tunnel. It's been up for 2 hours because I just upgraded that tunnel earlier today, even though it tells me I need to upgrade it again. So if I look at that main tunnel, edit the app, edit the configuration on that and go to, I'll show you private network, right? So this is where I tell it what exists in my data center. So I have 1/24. It's that one that I showed you in the slide. If you have additional ones, you can add them here as well. So pretty flexible there. And what I'm going to do now is add a public host name, right? So I have one that exists right here, but I'm going to add a new one. And just for, I don't know, because we're hanging out with the Carahsoft folks today, I'm going to make a subdomain for that. And this is just on one of the domains that I own. And I'm going to set to HTTP, and I'm going to pin the address to that. And I'll quickly show you if I open up another browser tab and go to Carahsoft. Nope, that's not what I want. Right, that doesn't exist. Whoops. And I'm going to save that host name. And here it is about 14 after. I've created that host name. If I went back and showed you the DNS settings for this domain, you'd actually see that Carahsoft exists there. And you can see just like that, in a matter of seconds, after I created that public host name on robertrasner.com, it now resolves from any of these locations around the world, right? So that's pretty nice. Now, you could go to this URL and you could see the exact same thing that I'm looking at. But this is something I don't necessarily want folks to get to. So that takes us to the second half of this. Like, how do I lock that down so that only my vendors or my employees can get access to that? Super simple. I'm going to come up here to Access and Applications. And this is where we create applications that we want to grant access to our users or vendors or whomever, right? I've got a handful of applications that I've already created, but I'm going to create one specifically for this. I'm going to call it Carahsoft, and I'm going to add the public host name for it. Pick off the domain. I don't care about the path. And I need to then create a policy or tell it which policy to use. Just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to use the employee default policy. There are a number of different things that you can set here, including what login methods you have available. I have two configured in my Zero Trust environment. One is single sign-on with GitHub, and one is a one-time PIN. I'm just going to leave that go for now. And go to next and save. Let that spin. It shows up here. And if I come back and let's see if I did this correctly. When I log into my Zero Trust portal, which is my last name.cloudflareaccess.com, I'm going to single sign on with GitHub, which is my identity provider. And you can see here that the Carahsoft link has shown up. So this is how we can create clientless access to applications from within here. So just to kind of complete the circle on that, if I try to go to that, did I spell that right? Yeah, there we go. Whoops. I try to do a refresh on that, I think because I've already done. So what normally would happen is I would see an authentication page for that. I can get it normally directly through here. But what we'll see is a login page if I try to get to it directly. So that is how we can, again, clientlessly get to things like that. Whoops. So how does that look from a client perspective? Well, let's drag in my Mac virtual machine that has the Cloudflare Warp client running on it. You can see that it is connected to my environment. And the same kind of thing. If I try to get to that box from here, it's going to request that I authenticate. and then I can get access to that box. So very easy from a clientless perspective and from a client perspective to allow your users granular access to applications that sit in here. So very good there. Another use case that I think is really important, right? And by the way, this you can use for clientless and client-based access to control what your users can do from within SaaS applications, from within your private cloud or public cloud environments. And in each of these cases, we're going to check the identity of the user. We saw that how I was single sign-oning with GitHub as my single sign-on identity provider. You're probably not using GitHub. You're probably using something like Okta or Entra or something like that. And we can pull in the group information, and then you can assign applications to different groups of users. We can also check the device posture of the clients that are connecting. So we can check for the version of operating system. We can check for certain processors or files that exist or don't exist. And we can even integrate with third-party providers such as CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or more to make sure that the posture is up to snuff according to the rules that you've put into place in those products. Very nice. So then another use case is how do we provide secure internet browsing for our users? So this is when they're going, out to the internet. Most of the times the places that we go and we visit are probably okay, but not always are there safe environments that we land on. So how can we control that? So I'll show you a little bit back in here. Right? So one of the things that we can do is create DNS policies that prevent your users from going to specific sites. So, think about hate speech or weapons or, things like that, that you're like, maybe that's not appropriate for the work environment. So let's put some guardrails around that. And just for purposes of example, I've not used any of those. I've used car manufacturers. So if I am sitting here on my client machine and my work machine, and I try to go to gm.com, it's going to show me the default Cloudflare block page. It tells me that access to this site is restricted. It gives me information that I can take to my administrator if I think that this is in error. GM.com is probably kind of a silly example. I have nothing against them. I blocked the other ones as well, just for purposes of demonstration. And how do we do that from Cloudflare, right? So that goes into Gateway. So if we look at Gateway and firewall policies, we can create 3 different types of firewall policies, DNS, network, and HTTP. And we can see down here that I have a rule that says, hey, block car companies. It's a pretty simple rule. I'll just go in and edit it. And with all of the policies that you create, there are a couple things that you need to put in: a name, criteria, and an action. So the criteria here is, hey, if the domain is in the list of car manufacturers, which I have created down in the lists section that has a handful of car manufacturers in it, take this action. I've chosen block because that's what I wanted to show, but you can allow, override, force safe search, or put it into YouTube restricted mode. So very easy to create policies. Again, I know this one's kind of a silly policy, but it doesn't seem to offend anybody, so I like to leave it in there. The other thing that I like to show is remote browser isolation. So what if I told you that you can create policies for when users go to specific domains that maybe could be a bit dodgy? And we don't know what those are necessarily, but we can look for kind of indicators like, here, is this a newly created domain? Is it on any kind of like lists of dodgy websites? We can, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen on those, because not all newly created domains are bad, but some are. So what can we do to help protect the users? Well, that's with remote browser isolation. And I have another kind of silly example, right? So I have Yahoo set up so that when I go to yahoo.com, this browser page that you're seeing is actually being rendered on the edge of Cloudflare's network. So, probably over here somewhere, but if I was coming from Sydney, it would be, I think Sydney's here, it would be rendered over here. And the contents are then delivered to my browser. But I can take action on that. So like the effect here is if there are any malicious scripts or links or anything like that, I, as the user on my machine, am protected because all of those potential malicious scripts are being run on Cloudflare's edge. So that's cool. But I can even put further guardrails on that. Like maybe I don't want to allow copying and pasting or printing or keyboard input. And for this example, I've done exactly that. So if I try to type in something in the search bar, I get a pop-up message that says, hey, you're not allowed to use the keyboard. It's clearly kind of a silly example, but it demonstrates what remote browser isolation can do for you. Similarly, if I try to copy the link address, I've set my rules so that we can't do any copying here. So again, a bit draconian, but it shows you the power of what we can do with remote browser isolation. So how do we set that up? That also exists in firewall policies. And if we go over to HTTP, I have a policy set for remote browser isolation, right? And we'll quickly take a look at that. And again, you just need to have a name, some criteria. And in this case, you can see exactly what happened here. I've got a domain in yahoo.com, or if it's in any of these domains, right? So this is probably a little more real world as an example. And then my action is to isolate, right? So very easy. Instead, with HTTP rules, instead of just allow block and the YouTube and the safe search, I get the additional one of isolate and redirect. So that's how we can help protect your users when they're out here from going to potentially malicious sites out here. The last thing I want to show you is how we can protect your SaaS applications and make sure that they have been set up securely. So that's things like Microsoft Office, Salesforce Box, and a number of others. So I don't have an example of that, but what I can show you is how we set that up. So that takes us down to, again, on the Zero Trust page, down to CASB, and manage, whoops, and review content findings. Nope, not there. Posture findings. So I have one SaaS application set up in this environment, and that's GitHub because I use it. And you can see here that with that integration, it's told me that, hey, you don't have user two-factor authentication, or it tells me that it's disabled. It tells me that the organizational two-factor authentication is disabled. This seems like redundant. And it also tells me that I have no default branch protection. Now, these are all from a couple months ago. I've actually fixed all of this stuff, but left them here to show you as an example of the kinds of things that we're doing to make sure that the SaaS applications that you are using in your environment have been set up in a secure manner. Now, other than GitHub, we do have a number of integrations that are available, including AWS Box, Dropbox, Google Cloud, and a number of others. With two specifically, Google Workspace and Microsoft, not only can we do the CASB, so Cloud Access Security Broker stuff, but we can also integrate with email in those particular solutions as well. So the tie-in with email is remote browser isolation also. So if malicious or potentially malicious links show up in email, we can force that through browser isolation. So those are some of the ways that we can help you with Cloudflare Zero Trust, protecting your end users from going to potentially malicious sites. We can help protect your SaaS environment, and we can allow secure access to applications that you have in your environment, whether they're in your data center or in public cloud. And with that, I will turn it back over to Anna.